Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching this recording and seeing this live. This will be the last event of the third year Connect event series for the fall 2025 term. My name is Alex. I am the Vice President of Internal Operations for CSGA, and I want to talk about a little bit about research as a medical student. And I know that some students really don't want to do research. Some students really love to do research, and there's everything in between. And I want to talk a little bit today about why research as a medical student, especially as a third year who is getting into clinicals and really getting their feet wet with how clinical life is like, should do some research and how it can benefit them. So the importance of research are several different bullets that I like to go into. One of them is that it demonstrates that you can meaningfully contribute to scholarly work so that when you are going into your residency application, and you're entering all the things that you've done, you can articulate how you have contributed to the literature of a particular topic and not just spend all your time doing exams and studying and contributing only to one aspect of what is medicine. It also ensures that your CV is well-rounded, right? The most competitive applicants and the ones who are the most ambitious folks, they are involved in extracurriculars, they have leadership positions, they've done service, they do well academically, and they also do research as well. It illustrates strong time management skills because doing research can be very time extensive, and the ability to balance both time doing research and while also studying for your cores shelf exams and for the USMLE exams is a very important skill to have. Moreover, you can foster strong relationships with physicians and residents because generally speaking, you don't usually do research on your own as a medical student. There's people that you work with, and generally speaking, it's the residents and the physicians on the case that you are pretty much talking about. Finally, it does increase your competitiveness when applying to residency. You have to bear in mind that we are competing with students from the US medical schools and other Caribbean medical schools, and we need to be able to articulate why we deserve a spot over anyone else. And having done meaningful research and adding that to your CV is going to make you a better looking applicant in the eyes of residency program directors. So there are important aspects of research that can benefit a student. Even if they're not interested in research at all, even if they want no career in research, it is worthwhile to be involved as a future physician. There are, of course, many types of research opportunities available, and of course, the folks doing MPHs and PhDs and master's programs know all about it. But within the context of what is available as a third year student, because our time is so limited, I've only included what is reasonable as a student. That's going to be your case reports, your literature reviews, and your poster presentations. Blog posts can be kind of tricky. I included them here because they can count towards your research repertoire if they are peer reviewed. However, you cannot just take a blog post and slap it everywhere, right? I'm not going to expand upon it further beyond this slide. So blog posts, just be mindful about what avenue you use in order to have your post be published. And of course, there's more advanced projects like systematic reviews and other types of research that are much more labor intensive. They require more people, much more of a time investment. And so as a third year student, which again, this is where this event is tailored to, you're not really going to see that, but I wanted to provide the context if you stumble upon a colleague who's very gung-ho about research and really wants to be involved, they may be doing more advanced projects like that. Talking a little bit more about case reports, that's probably going to be the easiest thing or one of the easier things to get involved with from the perspective of a third year medical student. A case report is basically a unique or rare patient case that adds to the literature, right? So you're not going to just write a case report about any old disease, right? If my patient has, for example, heart failure, that's not really going to be a unique enough case to add to the literature. If there's something very specific about maybe the management of that patient with heart failure, or something unique about the etiology of that patient's heart failure, then sure, maybe there's room there for you to get involved with that project and continue forward. However, you should be cognizant about what you're working on because not everything is going to be, publishable or worth adding to what's available in the literature. You certainly work with other members of the team that saw the patient, like residents on the case, the attending physician on the case. And the attending physician part is really important because what you may find is if you're trying to submit to a journal, what you'll do is you'll take your case presentation, you'll write it out in that document that has your introduction, your case presentation, and your conclusion is pretty much is that's called your manuscript. You're going to submit that manuscript to a journal, right? And the thing is, journals don't usually accept manuscripts from just medical students. I don't think I've ever seen one where they just accept stuff from medical students unless it's a journal that specifically says that they want medical student submissions, but generally try to find the attending physician on the case because that's the quote unquote senior author that's going to be supporting the work. You also need to be considerate about obtaining consent from the patient, or else the manuscript must be sufficiently anonymized. That could be a major liability issue if you are not taking the time to ensure that either consent was obtained or the manuscript was not anonymized. Because if you submit something and a detail gets through the cracks, it's not tracked by or found by the other editors or reviewers, and now you have something available on the public domain that contains patient data, and that could be a major issue legally down the road. So just be very careful as to how you write the manuscript to ensure that you're in the clear, your team's in the clear, the patient's health information is protected, and you're good to go. So they're pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Literature reviews are a bit more expansive, right? What you're basically doing is you're identifying a gap in the literature that could be not necessarily filled by the literature review, but brought to the attention of maybe future researchers, right? If you see a gap, what you'll do is you'll form a team of people, you will find all available publications in the literature, and then go ahead and make observations, analyze, draw your own conclusions. You're not necessarily doing a lot of the biostatistical work, like, odds ratio and all that random math. Here, you're just really observing what has been published to draw conclusions that can hopefully solve an issue down the road. They are a larger document because you are doing extensive searches of what has been published so far. And like I said before, other team members on the case can help you out. Poster presentations are a bit of a different avenue altogether, but they're also relatively simple in terms of adding to your research output, right? It's a way of presenting information without the effort of publishing in a journal. Maybe some journals are very expensive and you don't have the funds to be able to support that endeavor. Maybe it's a time thing and you would rather have something posted in a poster that can be put into your ERAS application as opposed to the length of time required to submit to a journal. Also, you should consider that maybe some topics that are interesting and worth discussing to your colleagues may not be necessarily publishable. I don't have any specific examples of that offhand, but do know that maybe not everything that a attending or a resident finds interesting and noteworthy about a particular case can move forward enough to be published in a journal. And in that scenario, this is a fantastic avenue for you to present your findings to your colleagues and discuss why you feel whatever aspect of the case is actually interesting. Now, where do you post them? You can post your presentations at conferences. If you're interested in any type of medicine, which obviously we are, you can go ahead and look up like the national organizations and see when they're going to have national conferences. Some organizations, like for example, the American College of Physicians, has chapters across the United States and which have their own poster presentations and competitions. And you can look up those requirements to be able to present posters. But there are my point is that there are different ways for you to present work. You just have to be creative and you just have to look, do some searching on the internet to see what is a worthwhile, for your time. I want to take a moment to talk about journal considerations as well. I will expand this in a second to talk about poster considerations, but journals tend to be a bit more finicky. You first want to double check that your project falls within the scope of the journal, which is interesting because not all journals for a particular specialty are going to accept everything. For example, if you have a hematology case and you want to submit to a hematology journal, some hematology journals would prefer only details about leukemias. Some journals would prefer more things about, say, sickle cell disease, or maybe some stuff about anemias, and so on and so forth. My point is that so you don't waste your time, ensure that the journal that you pick would more likely than not accept the work that you're presenting. Journals also tend to have an article processing charge, which can be very large sums of money. Some journals have a fee of $3,000 or several thousand dollars in order to publish, which is absolutely outrageous from the perspective of a third-year medical student. Some journals are also free. And some journals say, oh, there's no charge for you to submit to our journal based on individual aspects of the journal that are kind of outside the scope of this discussion. My point being, don't inadvertently submit to a journal that has an exorbitant amount of money as a fee. Definitely take a second to find out if you need to pay anything in order to submit. Some journals do have something where if you submit to them, it's no fee, but if it gets published, then you have to pay after the fact. So there are models in place, depending on the journal, that explain what the cost and how you pay is. So definitely investigate that. You can also investigate whether the journal is indexed on PubMed. This is not necessarily a huge thing that you need to do. However, we know that PubMed is a very premier database and very prestigious within the world of research. So if your journal is indexed in PubMed, that's definitely going to carry more weight than if a journal is not indexed in PubMed. But don't let that stop you from publishing because it's still going to be available online. It's still going to be something that future researchers could reference as, you know, time goes on. And the last thing I want to say is that each journal has their own guidelines, right? So if you are submitting a case report to one journal versus another, one journal may have a certain amount of text requirement for the introduction or the case presentation or whatever else. Some journals have a citation format that they prefer, like AMA or APA or anything else that could be used. Some journals have limits on images and figures. Some journals have limitations on the amount of authors on a particular type of submission. So the point here is ensure that you do your own research. Every journal has their own author guidelines, and definitely take the time to do your research into those author guidelines to ensure that you are submitting to a journal that is going to be worthwhile of your time. Something similar does happen with poster presentations as well. The posters are going to have their own considerations as to how big the poster can be and what goes into the poster and what is required in the presentation and so on. So definitely verify all the requirements as well. The other thing that you should be cognizant of with poster presentations is if you know a conference is coming up, more likely than not, actually, I would say bet on it. You're going to have some kind of deadline as to when you could submit your poster because not everything gets accepted, and not everything can get accepted because of either space considerations within the finite space of the present poster presentation auditorium, whatever their conference is doing, or not everything can be accepted because it doesn't fall in the scope of the conference, and so on. So just look up deadlines, look up any type of scheduling considerations in advance to ensure that you prepare your poster enough time. And if you have to fly somewhere to a conference, you can do that in advance. Just take the time to find out these details ahead of time to ensure that you, as the presenting author, are well prepared to go to the conference and present whatever it is you have to do. Now, as a third year student, Identifying opportunities can be tricky, right? You're in a new hospital potentially, you're going around, you're talking to attendings and residents that you've never met before, you're talking to students from other schools. So what do you do? Some bullet points that I'd like to discuss is communicate your intentions with those you are working with early. So if you know that you are on a team and you are working with a attending physician, you could ask that person early on, hey, I'm interested in doing research. I'm interested in case reports. Are there any projects that I can join? Are there any cases that you know of that I can contribute to? Right? If you communicate your intentions early and they know that you want to be involved and you want to do work and you want to contribute in a meaningful capacity, they're going to be they're going to be easier to work with, if you will. They're going to accommodate you. They're going to keep you in mind. They're going to consider you when such instances arise. Also, bear in mind that some residency programs do have some kind of scholarly requirement imposed on them as they're progressing through the residency program. So residents have an incentive to work on research as well, in addition to the medical students. So talk to the people you're working with early because they can help you find opportunities for you to be involved. Investigative the department promotes research opportunities, right? Sometimes some departments aren't really too focused on research for whatever reason. Maybe it's a specialty thing, maybe it's a hospital thing. There could reasons could be endless, but definitely investigate if there's opportunities at the hospital for you to present research. Maybe there's journal clubs. Maybe there's you know, conferences that are nearby that you can tag along with. You won't know until you ask, right? That's really the main point of the third bullet. When in doubt, ask. There are people out there that are willing to help you. There are cases all the time. As long as you show ambition and you show the team that you're willing to do the work and meaningfully contribute, it will eventually come your way. It may take some time, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease, if you will. I do want to take a moment to talk about some of the ERAS changes for the 2027 match cycle, because that means that any of us watching this now who is a third year student, or any of those fourth years who weren't in the match cycle that just took place in September 2 months ago, are going to need to know these things for the upcoming cycle. To my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything with the residency casts for OBGYN and EM, but I have seen it for here. So that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention early in November 2025 so that when folks apply in September 2026, at least they know ahead of time. So just to go through these bullet points a little bit. So the section that was of the application previously known as publications will now be called scholarly work. Apparently there were issues where it wasn't clear for the program directors to see what exactly was done and to what extent a potential applicant was working on projects. So they worked with ERAS to overhaul this section to make it clearer for both students to indicate their research output and also for program directors who are reviewing these applications to be able to see what exactly was done and when it was done and track things a lot easier. Applicants will only enter work submitted to peer-reviewed entities, conferences, and poster presentations. So going back to the blog thing from earlier, if you are submitting a blog post to a peer-reviewed entity, that could count as a research publication for your ERAS application, right? I know that some clubs, some of the clubs and orgs have journal clubs and have blogs. So in addition to conferences like the conferences that I mentioned before around the country held by specialty national organizations, or stuff at Ross Med Day at some of the bigger clinical sites, you could also add your peer-reviewed blogs. And of course, case reports and literature reviews and so on. If you're publishing to a journal, they have to be peer-reviewed because they're reviewed by the editor and by reviewers prior to submission and acceptance. That's just, generally speaking, part of the process. You can also now indicate the three most meaningful scholarly works or projects. So in the same way that we were able to indicate the three most meaningful scholarly activities or endeavors that we were part of that mean the most to me, we can now indicate with like a green star or some kind of symbol what the most meaningful scholarly works or projects was. You can also group together projects in what is called a scholarly collection. So, for example, if you have some kind of case and out of that case was some kind of post and a poster at a conference and maybe one other thing, you can now group all that together in a scholarly collection to show how a particular case or a particular project evolved over time, right? Because things do materialize over time. Maybe what started out as a simple project blossomed into multiple projects and multiple posters and a lot of work that came out of it, and you could articulate that in a scholarly collection. For the purpose of the scheduling, the updated scholarly work section of the application will first open on June 3rd, 2026, which I know is 6 months away from now, but it's good to have these dates in mind as you're preparing accordingly. And then, of course, the program opening day, which is the first day that all I'm sorry, all residency program directors are going to see all applications for all residency applicants at the same exact time on September 23rd. So we wanted to give you these dates early so you can go ahead and plan your time accordingly. And that's it. This was meant to be a brief session, a brief introduction for third year students to get their feet wet when it comes to getting involved in research. I hope that this was a meaningful session that can kind of give you some ideas and some insight as to what other students are doing and how you can best benefit yourself as an applicant and as a medical student. Of course, here's the calendar for all clinical events that are happening. As you know, everything will be on RUSM Connect moving forward. So please use this calendar that you see on the screen to plan your future events and get involved accordingly. So thank you for coming, and I appreciate you watching this recording.